In this week's episode of Studio Inter, we'll be discussing all things Inter together with broadcast journalist Sheridan Bird. We'll be previewing the games against Juventus and Bayern. This week's Moggi, Moratti and Frog, and much more. Everything here on Studio Inter on SempreInter.com.
Now Barilla, fabulous control, bullet finish. Nothing can stop Nicola Barilla this season.
Benvenuti, bentornati to another edition of Studio Inter. I'm your host Nima Nerazzurri, wishing you back to a week, to the start of a week where Inter go relaxed to Munich. It doesn't matter what happens there. They can rotate. They're already through. But before we get to all of that, let me begin by introducing my panelists, starting with Mr. Positivity himself, Mr. Mohammed Nassar. We're brimming with positivity, although I would say we're not as positive as we would have been had it not been for the Lukaku injury situation, which we're going to discuss as well.
Yeah, but I feel like Oprah today, we're handing out positivity to everyone. You get some positivity, you get some positivity, you get some positivity. So, yeah, it's a good episode to be in.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're joined by a very good friend of ours. He runs the Brothers of the World podcast, Mr. Michael McDuffie. How you doing, Mike? Good to have you back again.
Yeah, good to be back. Seems you can't get rid of me. So I'm very happy about that. Very happy to be back. Very happy to talk with Sheridan as well.
Well, speaking of that, we have a very special guest. He is he's a broadcast journalist. He's with AC Milan right now, but we won't hold that against him too much. But he also writes for the official Champions League magazine called Champions Weekly, or no? Well, that's not what it's called, or what was it? I forgot.
Champions Journal, as I told you 14 seconds ago, but it's okay. Yes. It's okay.
Yes, but I'm an old man, so yeah, I forget things.
I forgive you.
How are you doing, Sheridan? Welcome back. It's a long time.
I'm very well. It has been a long time, and I was thinking the other day that it's was I too cheeky? Was I too rude about the Nerazzurri the last time I was on? And the answer is probably yes. But it had been a while. So when you got one of your army of assistants to get in touch with me, it was I got the golden gilded letter, the invitation. I was very pleased to come back, and here we are now, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to have you, Sheridan. I mean, let's get right into it. We haven't spoken in a while. I mean, last you were on was last season. I think it was around this time, and you predicted Milan to win because I remember you saying that you felt Milan had that feel about them that they were going to win, and they did. So so far this season, surely that feeling that you had last year, would you ascribe that to any of the Milan teams, or is it a certain Lucio in Naples that has that you think will as things stand today? What's your feeling there? Who do you think is the favourites this season?
Well, it's a really tough one. I mean, current form you can't see beyond it between being a 3-horse race between the city of Milan and its various guises and Napoli. The only thing that I keep telling friends of mine who support Napoli or friends in the UK who have been watching them this season and saying, oh, they're amazing, is that it's Napoli who have only won 2 championships or Scudetti since 1926, and that happens for a reason. And it's Luciano Spalletti who does this kind of thing very well, and it's very entertaining. But at a certain point, depending on what side you sit upon, unfortunately or fortunately, that they probably won't get it over the line, as the modern parlance is. So it's really hard to predict, but I can't see anyone out of those 3 winning it. It just depends who gets to spring or early spring or March in best condition. I am anticipating Napoli just to have a drop because it's impossible not to. They can't keep up this such great form and scoring goals left, right and centre. I remember Spalletti's Roma, who gave Inter a run for their money several times in the 2000s but didn't win it. So I, with heavy heart, would rule Napoli out. So Inter, I'm sure we'll get into it later, but it'll be one of those 3, but probably not Napoli.
Oh, interesting. Let's focus a little bit about Inter. I mean, it's always eventful in the black and blue part of on the black and blue side of the Navigli. It's never a dull moment. I wanted to hear. I mean, started really poorly this season, and then the magical month of October, where Inter just 8 games started poor, undeserved defeat against Roma. But then 6 wins, 1 draw, and that draw was against Barcelona away in a crazy game, which ended 3-3, which should have, in all honesty, Inter should have won that. But it started poorly, and now it's going really well. And so Inzaghi has severely criticized, and now he's being praised. How highly do you rank Simone Inzaghi as a coach? Do you rank him as highly as I do? Because I've always thought that he, I think he will be the next Italian super coach. I've always said that. And how much of this turnaround do you ascribe to him overall? What's your thoughts on him?
I'm with you. I think he's fantastic. I thought what he achieved at Lazio was incredible, because we know that if you manage Lazio, you're not going to have tons of cash to spend. So he did really well. He moved up a rung in the ladder with Inter, and obviously the budget's a bit bigger and so are the resources. But they can't throw money around. I don't think anyone in Italy can really. But Inzaghi's done fantastically well, and we haven't spoken since last season's denouement, I don't think. But let's be honest, it's but for the unfortunate error by the reserve goalkeeper Radu, Inter would have taken it to the last day, maybe to the last half of the last match, the last 10 minutes. So Inzaghi, they won the Coppa Italia, they narrowly lost the league. Inter did really well last year, and I'm like you, I really rate Inzaghi. He's quite low key, and he's not loud, he's not obnoxious, he's not a cry eye, he's not a moaner. And I think that's quite rare, actually. But I also would say, like you, that what he does and the way he goes about his work really impresses me. And last year he was fractions away from a double, which I know doesn't count as much in Italy as it might do in England. But I know I really rate Simone Inzaghi, and I think he's a decent person as well.
Agreed. I'm going to hand you over to Mo. Mo, did you have a question for Sheridan? Then the floor is yours.
Yeah, hi Sheridan. So on the back of what your season-long predictions, what do you think would constitute, in all objectivity, someone from the outside looking in, what would constitute a successful season for Inter, knowing how strong the squad was, knowing how close the team was to winning the Scudetto last year, and knowing, how Milan are this season, whether they're stronger or weaker, I don't know, you probably know best. So domestically, what would constitute a successful season for Inter, do you think?
Well, I think if I can reverse the question, it's a very good question, but if I can reverse it and say, what would Inzaghi have to do for it to be a bad season, or to be removed from his role? Well, I think that's very difficult, because I think Inter and the powers that be are very happy with him. So if he repeated last year, i.e. coming second narrowly and winning the Coppa Italia, I still think that would be a good achievement, because it's not easy to win the Scudetto. Antonio Conte proved it at Inter that it doesn't happen that often. When it does, it takes a superhuman effort. But if Inzaghi this year were to really push whoever wins the league to the wire, if he were to win the Coppa Italia again, which he has every chance, and if he were to if they could sneak into the quarterfinals of the Champions League, I think that would be a good season. A great season, naturally, would be Inzaghi winning the Scudetto. So, I believe that domestically the dream is to come first, but even if they come second, I think that'll be a good effort, because Inzaghi's, he's had to deal with lots of injuries and people just suddenly losing form and not being the player they once were, and there will be ups and downs. So I would say that basically in the top 2, Coppa Italia, and maybe get to the quarterfinals of the Champions League. If they draw on paper a more malleable team, or a less daunting team in the Champions League, who knows, maybe get to the semi-finals.
One can only dream. Michael, did you have a question for Sheridan? Then the floor is yours.
Yeah, sure. I know Sheridan, you have to have, a higher, more treetop level looking at Champions League based on your background. And I am just kind of curious because we know the state of Italian football, finances and everything else going on. Is there a specific team that you see making it the deepest in the Champions League? Because for the first time in a while, it feels like we have a few teams from Italy in there. This might be more of a question for Nima's Italian football podcast, but yeah, just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
It's very polite. I like the introduction to that was fabulous. So thank you. Very polite. I think you should be on more often. Maybe you should host it. I'm just saying.
I agree. I think so. I think
Very
so
polite.
too. I agree. I agree.
No, I don't normally like national stereotypes unless they're positive, and Americans are very polite. So thank some of them. So thank you very much. As for the answer to your question, it's difficult to see an Italian club get into the semi-final. It really is, and that's not me speaking badly of the championship in Serie. It's just so hard to see because they are so far behind in many ways. But there is some of a streetwise element. It's just really tricky to see them really turning over one of the big boys. And yeah, by big boy, you can say rich. Like it's really difficult to envisage over 180 minutes someone like Milan or Inter or Napoli defeating one of the European super clubs or one of the clubs that have won the competition more than 4 times. Obviously, some of those bigger clubs are struggling really badly, like Liverpool, and Bayern Munich have had to change a few things around and bed in some new players. But I just think we're a few years beyond or away from an Italian club actually sort of getting to the final again. Obviously, I'm sure it's very disappointing for you guys on this podcast, but Juventus troubles obviously mean they won't be taking place in the competition after Christmas. So I'm sure you're all very upset about that. But it still feels a few years away, and it happened in the Premier League. Without wanting to ramble any further, when Manchester United reached the final in 1999, I was living in England, and it was like a royal coronation. Like, we were not used to an English team in the final of the European Cup because it hadn't happened after the ban. So these things do change, but it's going to be a while, I think, until someone from Serie can line up in the final. But I could be wrong.
Yes, and that's a good question. I want to talk a little bit also about what you think, a little bit of prediction as well. I mean, last season you were spot on, and the season before that, I remember you said Inter were going to win. I did not think that. And this season, last season you said Milan were going to win. They win. So I'm thinking you've got some sort of, that you're on a roll. So I wanted to hear your top 6, start from 1 to 6, the Serie A. How do you think it's going to end?
Top 6, come on, that's taking the mickey. Top 6, crikey.
Yeah, come on.
My word, I was expecting a nice chat about Inter, but it's getting all competitive. All right, top 6 in Serie A. That's all right. Let me think. Well, I've already said that it's either Milan or Inter top. Just to get some reaction on this podcast, I'll say Milan top. Then I'll say Inter second. Then Napoli third. I would love it to be Lazio because I love Sarri, but it will probably be Atalanta fourth. Lazio fifth and Juventus sixth. There you go. Hope that wasn't too painful, Nima, but yeah.
No, not at all. Especially the Juventus prediction was outstanding. Now Inter, speaking of Juventus, Inter travel to play Juve. They play Bayern in a completely meaningless game, completely dead rubber, as Bayern have already secured the top spot. Inter have secured the second spot. So, it's pretty much it doesn't really matter. It's a glorified friendly, which is a nice feeling to have when you've got the Derby d'Italia on Sunday night away at the Allianz Stadium. Juventus have had a disastrous season. There's no doubt about that. They're out of the Champions League. They'll probably, most likely, be in the Europa League, but they could even end up not playing there. I wanted to ask you, going into this game, I mean, of course, now, Allegri, not exactly known for being the best friend of young players, but the young players were the ones who saved him against Lecce away. I mean, going into this game, what kind of game are you expecting? I mean, do you see Inter as favourites, or do you feel a little bit like me that it doesn't really matter when these two teams meet because of the derby character of the game? What kind of game are you expecting?
Well, oddly enough, I agree with you in the sense that it's a derby, so form really doesn't matter. I don't want to be too Anglo-centric, but Liverpool-Manchester City was a prime example of that. Not so much a derby, but two sides who recently have made the Premier League their private battle, and Liverpool were in horrendous form and they beat City. Likewise, Juventus are in scratchy form, although it's sort of gone under the radar that they've won 4 of their last 5 matches in all competitions. So that's something to be wary of. But I just think that Inter are a superior team, and they have been last season. Simone Inzaghi, as we already mentioned, beat them in the Coppa Italia final, and Inter have got the knock on Juventus this current batch. So Inter are favourites, absolutely. Juventus, though, will have something special. You know that. They won't want to make it easy for Inter. Inter don't have the secret weapon of Vidal as well, who scored against his old team and really relished that anymore. I don't know where he is. I think he went to Brazil.
He went to Flamengo. He won the Copa Libertadores, I think yesterday or the night before.
I know. I saw that they won it, and I saw that Gabriel Barbosa scored. So
again, he decided another Copa Libertadores final. It's crazy.
Here's a moderately interesting fact for you. I was commentating when he scored his first goal for Inter all those years.
The only goal he ever scored for against Bologna. I remember that.
I think they were wearing the Sprite kit.
Yes, they were away against Bologna during Pioli, of all people.
Wow, there you go. And I was commentating on it, and Felipe Melo got subbed at half time, and I actually celebrated that on air. Because I don't care if he's listening. But he didn't come out for the half time, and his number was flashed up that it was made clear that he had been sacrificed because he was on a yellow card after about 10 minutes, I think, just trying to break people's necks. And I remember saying, well, the first news for this second half is that we will no longer be able to witness Felipe Melo's interpretation of football.
Yes, I remember this. I remember this.
Yeah.
I remember you saying that.
Yeah, and I stand by it. But going back to the Vidal, the Juventus Inter, the changing in the sort of hierarchy, the fortunes, I think Inter are too strong. They're too good. Inter, in terms of football, could win. But in terms of bloody-mindedness and tenacity and let's really get one over Inter, the battle-hardened, struggling Juventus might have the edge on mentality. But it's really hard to say. They might pull something. They might pull a mega performance out the bag, and all of a sudden it'll be, we believed in Allegri all along. Or all of the matches in which they've papered over the cracks and been a bit fortunate, they might not be able to rely on such luck or such fortune against an equally perhaps pumped up Inter. So I expect Inter to win, but you never know in these fixtures.
No, you don't. And one player who won't be featured is Romelu Lukaku, who was just coming back from a hamstring injury and now has suffered a thigh strain. Questions are being asked about his physicality and his health. In the last year, he's missed to date 20 matches due to injury. The 8 years preceding that, he'd missed 28 games in total due to injury. I mean, he's only 29. He's not even 30 yet. But I mean, have we already reached a point with him, do you think, where his physique, given how big he is and this type of player he is, that we already reached a point where it's a physical decline and this is how it's going to look from now on? What are your thoughts around that?
Well, I mean, the thing is, you're right. It could be that because, I don't know exactly when he made his professional debut in Belgium. But if I don't know, guessing it might be something like 16 or 17. So he's already got sort of 12 years of football under the bonnet or under the hood, if you prefer. So he's already got a lot of, professional. Well, I only said that because I wasn't sure if everyone, because you're in Sweden. I wasn't sure if Mohammed or Michael would know what bonnet meant. They might have thought it was a kind of hat that women wore in the 19th century. But he's already got a lot of, football in. So it could be that he's kind of on a physical decline. it really could be a lot of inactivity. Hardly played at Chelsea. That can't help. He looks to me like the kind of athlete, the kind of man who needs to play every week to stay in tip-top condition. Because if he doesn't, a muscle here or a muscle there, might suffer a twinge. I don't think it's the real end, so to speak, but I think he might lose some of his pace, and he might have to adapt his game as he enters his 30s. But he has played a lot of football, often the lone striker. He loves kind of bouncing off defenders, and he likes playing the battering ram role, and he likes sprinting one-on-one towards the goal. But that does have a cumulative effect. So yeah, it's sad to see, but it does. These days, players, they're kind of the beginning of the decline starts earlier and earlier in sort of the late 20s because they started playing earlier and earlier. It'd be interesting to look up online how old he was when he made his senior debut, but I get the feeling he would have been very, very young.
Oh, he was. There's a famous photo of him when he's at Antwerpen, I think. Or he's in Anderlecht, 2009. Yeah, 2009. So he was he's born 2009. He's born in 1993. So yeah, 16 years old. Yeah, just 15 actually. Hadn't turned, or actually he had turned 16. I just double checked now. It was 24th of May 2009, and he turned 16 on the 13th of May. But yeah, no, that's a good point. Before we let you go, I know you're not on social media per se, as you so brilliantly told me about Twitter. Things in life should be both entertaining or educational, and Twitter you found were neither. So where can people find your work if they wish to follow you? And I really strongly recommend they should.
Very kind. Yeah, I always say, Twitter, I stopped using Twitter because it wasn't entertaining or informative. It was absolute hogwash. And it's getting worse, I gather. And I'm still aware of it. I haven't completely... People send me things every now and then. But yeah, I don't have Twitter, and I don't miss it. I do have Instagram, but because of work reasons, I made it private recently, only because it's easier, basically. So if people want to follow me, if they really want to see pictures of plants and cats and cocktails, I'm on Instagram, and they're welcome to put a request in. And my work, the main stuff is in the Champions Journal, the magazine, or Champions Weekly, as you call it, Nima. But we
Sorry.
It's okay. It's only one thing to remember. But no, Champions Journal. It's like you speak 1,000 languages, Nima, but you can't remember Champions Journal 14 seconds after I told you.
It has been a long day. I'm tired, and I'm so sorry.
You're tired and you're elderly. Okay, me too.
Exactly.
Me too. But no, Champions Journal is the official magazine of the Champions League, but it's not a propaganda puff piece, so don't have fear that it's just nonsense. And it's you have to pay for it. It's online, but you have to subscribe to it, and I think that makes sense. I'm sure you'd agree, Nima, that I think good work should be paid for.
Absolutely.
And so yeah, Champions Journal. Please tell or encourage your listeners and your followers to get involved in that, because it is a great magazine. And commentating on Milan channel, which I don't think your listeners and your followers will probably subscribe to Milan channel. But you never know. There are some families in Milan in which the relatives sort of quite support one team and don't really hate the other side, in the sense that it's a friendly rivalry in some families. So you never know. But that's where people can keep in touch, or just see what's going on. Instagram and Champions Journal for the work, and I pop up in other places. But not Twitter. No, absolutely. Are you still on Twitter, Nima?
Yes, I am. I'm still on Twitter. Yes.
Are you spreading the gospel of Tavaloi on Twitter?
Yeah, I try not to. I try to keep it mostly about Inter, but I do fail sometimes, I feel. Thank you so much, Sheridan. It's always a pleasure to have you, and looking forward to talking to you soon.
My pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your podcast. Enjoy the match against Bayern Munich, and enjoy the Derby d'Italia. And I'll try and see if you can get me on with less of a gap next time, because I always enjoy myself, and I always enjoy teasing Inter.
Yes, so it's a pleasure. Pleasure is all ours. Take care, Sheridan.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye. Right. Let's talk about let's start there with the Lukaku injury, because it is a talking point, and I wanted to talk to you. I wanted to ask your opinion there, Mo. I mean, in the beginning, I was, when people were saying this, like, oh, are we talking about a physical decline? Is this where we are? I was a little bit reluctant, but with this happening again, I'm starting to think that Inter should, well, bring Satriano back just to have something to back on, because Dzeko, we can't keep overusing him. Where are your thoughts on all this, Mo?
Well, first things first is thank God it's just a loan until we're able to really assess his muscular condition through the season, and whether this is, like you say, a blip, and a very unlucky and unfortunate blip, or whether it's more indicative of age-related decline in his physique. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, I think we've touched upon this a few times. This is a very awkward season with the World Cup being so close. So I wonder, are players just a bit so much more careful? I mean, we've seen the news that Pogba is going to miss the World Cup today. So I mean, are players, especially when it comes to like a muscle fatigue or a twinge or something that they would normally play through, are they potentially a bit more careful now to ensure, with the best of intentions? I mean, I'm sure Lukaku, we know the passion he feels for Inter and the importance of the Derby d'Italia game, but still, if it is in fact a genuine pain that he might have normally played through, might he be a bit more cautious with the handling of the strain? So I think, again, I don't know if it's I don't know if, what's this, but I'm kind of hoping it's a bit symptomatic of this odd season that we're in, with the World Cup coming smack bang in the middle of the season. So yeah, that's where I stand.
Yeah, that's a good shout. What about you, Mike? I mean, do you think that now's the time to kind of, recall Martin Satriano? Because I think I'm seriously thinking, because Inter don't have any money. Obviously, Marcus Thuram. Anyone who follows me on Twitter, listens to the Italian Football Podcast, this podcast, knows I want Marcus Thuram. I wanted Marcus Thuram instead of Joaquin Correa, and I was vocal about that already when Inter were gonna buy Marcus Thuram, but he injured himself and ended up buying Joaquin Correa, and his contract expires in the summer, and he's on incredible form. So I do think Inter should try in January to bring him in, even though it would be really, really difficult. But worst case scenario, I'd bring in Satriano. Where are you on this?
Yeah, I will get on my hands and knees and beg for Marcus Thuram, because I was really excited when he was linked with Inter and it was getting close, but then the injury comes. I think that's a great shout, and if some concrete links start coming up, I'll be very excited for that. But you gotta have depth, and if you have to bring in Satriano, I have always thought there was a player there. Maybe it's, the time to throw him in the fire and see what happens. But maybe this Lukaku thing won't be too serious, but I also do worry that, nobody's not going to go all out in the World Cup. This may be the last chance. This is the last chance for this Belgian generation to get anything. So he's going to be, if he's fit, he's going to be giving 3,000% at the World Cup, and he might come back in the same condition that he leaves in, which is, just a little ragged, a little beat up, just not fit. And I mean, Lukaku has been playing since he was, what did we say, 15, 16? That is 15 years of a hard style of football that he plays. And it reminds me, like in American football, I'm going to lose a lot of people here. You have running backs who, their careers are so short because what they do is so physically taxing. And the way that Lukaku plays is a very physically taxing game. It's a beautiful game. I love it. Lukaku at his peak at Inter, that's a wonderful player. That is some of the football that I enjoy the most, but you can't do that forever. And I hope that, it is just something left over from whatever this, issue with going to Chelsea, coming back, leaving, being all in between. I hope it's just something from that and not his actual decline, because I would just, for the player himself and just for the player himself, for Inter, and just for everyone involved, like I hope he can bounce back, because I really do love his football at his peak.
For sure, and especially with his BFF Lautaro Martinez, who we know those two have fun when they're in form and play together. They can rip apart any defense, no doubt about that. But it's I mean there is also another side to this, and the other side to this is always, of course, that you can also say that Lukaku has been raring to go to show his real value, to show who he is and what he can do, and again I do want to stress what Timothée Pinon, a French journalist and a friend of mine, did tweet out today, and we published it on SempreInter, and I contacted him privately and asked him what he meant, and to clarify. And basically, what from he's been hearing from Lukaku's people that this is not a relapse or a new injury, but we're talking about residual pain, because that's what happened. He felt pain. They did a screening, and they saw a muscle strain. And Timot says that this is quite common with muscle injuries, where the scars are usually significant. But his objective is to play again with Inter before the World Cup, because Lukaku considers it very complicated for a player of his profile to be able to do himself any justice in Qatar without having gained some match fitness. However, he can't play without being fully fit. So, it's like something has to give here. One thing we can say is that he was planned to play at least 45 minutes against Bayern Munich. He's not going to take part at all. And I don't think he's going to take any part against the Juve game as well, even though they're going to have another check in a few days to see his physical status. I think at this point, just keep him. Don't play him, and hopefully maybe play him against Atalanta or Bologna or something like that. If he's not had a real injury, not a tear, but if it's just a strain, according to Inter. We'll have to wait and see. But it's absolutely not a good situation for Inter, because they need another. They need the starting number 9. And as much as Dzeko is a very useful player, he doesn't offer what Lukaku does. He's not as quick enough. He's not as fast enough. He doesn't attack the space as good as Lukaku does. So Lukaku in this Inter would, and also with Onana and his distribution, I mean, Lukaku would be a fit. Lukaku would destroy defenses in the Serie A. At least I think we all agree on that. But let's talk about the Victoria Pilsen game a little bit before going into Bayern Munich. There's really not that much to say about the Bayern Munich game, but just quickly before we go to the Pilsen game, I mean, personally, my starting lineup against Bayern Munich is Handanovic in goal, Skriniar to the right, and then sub him out at halftime for De Vrij. Acerbi in the middle, Darmian in the left of the back three, Gosens to the left, but Bellanova to the right, Gagliardini, Aslani, and then Barella, Mkhitaryan, Çalhanoğlu play 40. Two of them play 45 minutes each. Correa starts, and then Lautaro, Dzeko 45 minutes each. That's my lineup. Other than that, I don't care about this game. I could not care less. What's your thoughts, Mo?
I thought you were talking about the Victoria game.
No. I thought we'd talk about just get rid of the Bayern game before we.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty solid lineup. I agree. I don't know if I would start Handanovic over Onana though. I don't know. I think like you said before, goalkeepers need continuity, and it's not like Onana has had this super long stretch. So yeah, I think maybe this is my only point of contention with you. I'd love to see Bellanova and Aslani play for an extended period of time and then see what these guys do. Yeah, no, I agree.
I mean, it's impossible to predict this, but I'm thinking Bayern wins 2-1, 3-1, something like that. Or are you?
Probably sounds reasonable.
Mike, what about you?
So you're saying we're not recreating 2011?
No, I don't think it's going to be that dramatic.
Okay. So that taking that into account, I mean, I like to see the rotation. I would really like to see a lot of faces that I haven't seen recently because they still need runouts. We still need to see what's there. It's a long season. I'm glad this game doesn't matter. I think that's a bullet dodged. For two reasons. Because, I mean, Pilsen's out of the way. That's a win. That makes the 3-3 Barcelona draw a moot point. No one has to point fingers at Christian Aslani or anyone else anymore about that. I'm very happy about that. Then if Lukaku has to miss another Champions League match, if it's a dead rubber, I mean, that's fine. Yeah, it's just it's coming at the right time. Juve right after. I don't think this Champions League group could have set up, much more perfect for Inter other than, of course, like winning the group. But like nobody was asking for that.
No, that would be unrealistic and unfair to asking to be able to compete with this Bayern Munich. I mean, for me, the favorites to win the Champions League, Bayern, City, they're the favorites with PSG in a little bit distance. But to me, Bayern and City are just in a league of their own. I don't think anyone else comes close to them. Right, the Victoria Pilsen game, 4-0, absolute Inter festival. Everyone's, it was complete happiness, and the vibe when Lukaku came on was so positive, and he scored his goal and all that. So, I mean, it does feel. I really want to praise Simone Inzaghi for what he's done here, because exactly a month ago, it's the 31st of October, we're sitting here, about a month ago, Inter had 4 defeats, had just lost to Roma, undeserved at home, but still a defeat. And they had this stretch of Champions League fixtures ahead of them with Fiorentina, and they've won every single one, except for the Barcelona game. And he's done so, and Inter have done so because he's shown by this team meeting that they all talk about, where they all sat down and spoke about what was not working, and everyone took responsibility and said what they did was a mistake. Everyone did a mea culpa. Everyone said what we're going to do to do better, and they decided on a strategy. And there has been changes. Inter are much more compact. They play deeper, and the team is much more balanced. And now things are. I mean, and now we see an Alessandro Bastoni and Nicolo Barella, who are simply unplayable right now. I think Bastoni is as good as I've ever seen him, and Barella is scoring for fun, but yet I still get the feeling that Barella has at least another 20-30% before he hits his absolute peak. Do you agree with that, Mo?
So I was hoping that if Barella wasn't going to be brought up, I was going to interject at some point to speak about him. I totally agree. I think the guy's got a good fair bit of upside still left in his potential. I was just wondering, I was thinking as I was thinking over the games before the podcast, I wonder how much of Barella's resurgence has to do with Mkhitaryan's injection into the team. I've been looking at the heat maps of Brozovic and Mkhitaryan so far this season, and you'll find that Miki takes a much wider sort of position up front, allowing Barella maybe to play more centrally and be that more effective up in the final third. I don't know. I haven't looked at it through. I haven't looked at the different heat maps in different games, but I'm just thinking a lot of the malaise early in the season was, this usual Brozovic body language, mispass, arms in the air sort of feeling that we got, and it's not there anymore. And I'm sure it's got nothing to do with interplayer, like between Brozovic and Barella and Çalhanoğlu, because the three form a great trio. But maybe there was something there that, like you had said, Inzaghi had asked of the midfield trio early in the season, and Brozovic's injury just catalyzed this new way of taking form in the pitch. We see much less of Hakan, but he's much more impactful when he's got the ball. But I just think Barella's on fire. Barella's incredible, and I'm just wondering how much of that has to do with the not the direct understanding, but where him and Mkhitaryan occupy space on the pitch.
That's a good point. I think it's a combination of Hakan Çalhanoğlu and Mkhitaryan. I think what you get with Mkhitaryan is a very high footballing IQ. He's not the quickest player anymore, but he's incredibly safe with the ball. He's a technical player, and he is a very intelligent football player. He sees the game and moves the game in a completely different way to Brozovic. It's a completely different dynamic. But I think I think that's part of it to Barella's resurgence. And also I think Hakan Çalhanoğlu. Look, Hakan Çalhanoğlu does not run as much as Brozovic does. I think that's pretty much impossible to cover more distance than Brozovic does on a football pitch in 90 minutes. But what Hakan Çalhanoğlu does is what Fabio Capello said, I think about a week ago on Club Calcio, on Sky Club Calcio. He said Brozovic is a better player in terms of creating from deep, but Çalhanoğlu provides more quality, and I think that's an interesting thing. I don't think there's a problem, because I think when this is a good problem to have, considering that we actually last season at some point started Matias Vecino as a regista. So I think it's good that you've got Hakan Çalhanoğlu and Brozovic to alternate between those, and also you can play both of them because you can't overplay Mkhitaryan either. He's not exactly a teenager, and what happens with that is that when teams mark Brozovic, that's okay, because he can swap places with Hakan Çalhanoğlu, who can they can swap places in between each other, and so if you mark one, then you leave space more for the other, and there's just similar to how Conte's Inter won the Scudetto, from February to May, where Eriksen, Barella, and Brozovic all kind of interchanged in midfield, and the three of them kind of could play in all three midfield positions. I think that's a really good thing to have. I want to get Mikey on this as well. Where are you on this little debate we've had on Barella? Do you think that Barella still has 20, 25, 30%, or however many percent left until he hits his ceiling? And why do you think it's got anything to do with the fact that maybe Brozovic isn't on the pitch, and it's because Çalhanoğlu and Mkhitaryan are providing a different kind of option for him?
It's interesting to me. I love watching Barella succeed, because if you are to go back to some of the very first episodes of my podcast, the Brothers of the World podcast at BOTW Pod, quick plug, I was very critical of the signing of Nicolo Barella. I was worried that he may not reach the peaks that were advertised, but here he is years on, and I think he is very close to, a peak. He's still relatively young. I mean, he's got a couple more years before I think he is, the full, complete midfielder in like world football. Like, it's going to take a while for him to, continue to learn. But, oh man, where he's at right now is amazing. And like, I do hope that there is something in the squad, something in him that will continue to push him to be greater, because I do agree. I do think that is in him. And to talk about the whole midfield that you guys were talking about, I think this is the most fluid midfield Inter have had since Conte left, since Eriksen had to be forced out. It's really been a joy to watch. And these runs that Barella is making now, we saw them under Conte, but like something about it also reminds me of kind of some of the midfield runs that a certain Sergej Milinkovic-Savic would make at Lazio under Simone Inzaghi. So it's very interesting. I'm very happy to see it, and I think there is more to come.
Yes, absolutely. Right, so we haven't spoken about it yet. We got to preview it. It's the Derby d'Italia on Sunday night, if I'm not mistaken, at 8:45 p.m. CET. Classic kickoff time in Italian football. 6th of November, Sunday, 8:45 CET. So look, you can't demand that Inter win away against Juve. It doesn't matter how poor Juve are. But I do feel that if Inter are to compete for this Scudetto, they have to win pretty much all three games, starting against Juve, and then Bologna, and then Atalanta. But let's focus on the Juve game. Is this a little bit of fool's gold? The fact that Inter look are coming from such great form, and playing reasonably well, and Juve are pretty much in perpetual crisis, can looks be deceiving. And also, if you look at the table, Juve are only 2 points behind Inter. I'm starting to feel that the biggest worry going into this game is that Inter underestimate this task. And that's Simone Inzaghi's biggest job, to get these guys to realize that no, you can't do that. This is still Juve. What do you think, Mo? What are your feelings going into this game?
Yeah, ironically, I think this is Inzaghi's game to win or lose. I think ultimately, like you just said, Inzaghi's preparation for the game. Inter are a better side, in better form, and like you've also said, and Sheridan earlier said, in derbies, form doesn't really matter. And this is, you get the Allianz, so it sucks. But I still think Inter are so much better and have achieved much closer to their potential than Juve have so far. So Inter know what to do, know what it takes. They've been to the Camp Nou and they've played well. They've almost beat Barca. Let's see what happens in the Allianz Arena midweek against Bayern. But if we put a good showing there, then it's our game to lose. So on the one hand, like you say, Simone cannot underestimate this game at all. He needs to, make sure that the players' headspace is correct. We are still playing Juve, and Juve at home are awful regardless of whatever state they're in. On the other hand, I think the only way Inter gets something out of this game is if they don't respect Juventus too much either. So if Inzaghi is going to play this cowardly sort of football that was pretty idiosyncratic of the first few games of the season, I don't think Inter are going to go. It's just you're going to give Juventus the space. You're going to cede the space. You're going to cede the initiative to Allegri, and Juve are going to punish Inter for that. If Inter are going to get anything out of this game, it's going to be by outplaying and outperforming Juventus over the 90 minutes, which they should be confident in being able to do at this point in time. That's it. So don't underestimate the game. Don't underestimate the match. But also don't over-respect Juventus either, because if we cede the reins of the game to Juventus, we're getting nothing. It's whether it's refereeing errors or the crowd or just Juventus's grit, whatever. We're just not going to win. It has to be 90 minutes, balls to the wall, great football, great Inzaghi ball.
Mikey, what are your thoughts going into this?
It's always interesting. There's always storylines going into derbies, but not to be too cliche, but a derby's a derby, and you can't really, you can calculate all day, but everything goes out the window when that ball's kicked off. We've seen some of the worst Inter teams just randomly rock up one day and, beat some of the best Juves of the past decade. Frank de Boer, like weeks from getting sacked, is one that comes to mind, beating one of the best Juves from that era. So,
what a
I
crazy
think Inter
game that was.
That was my favorite.
Insane game that was.
That was a very...
Stramala.
Yes, Stramala too. That was
yes.
also fantastic. That's probably my favorite, the Stramala one, the first. Conte's Invincibles. Stramaccioni with Gargano and Mudingai.
Yeah,
it was their first. It was their first loss in the new stadium, I believe.
Yes, it was. It really was.
Yeah, those are some of my fondest early Interista memories, are those wins, because wasn't much else going on in that time, so those were what I drew on my calendar, and those are some of the biggest wins of my early indoctrination into whatever this place is. Inter should win this. No doubt about it. This is a good team. This is a team that has hit form. They look like what we were hoping from them before the season started. It just took them way too long. But that can be blamed on a number of things. World Cup coming up, one of them as well. I just think if Inter play their game, they go there and they don't let Allegri absolutely muck up the entire game, Inter should be fine.
All right, predictions then. I think it's going to end in a 1-1 draw. I don't think Inter can beat Juve three in a row like this. I don't know. I think it's already three in a row. It's the Supercoppa League and Coppa Italia. But to beat Juve away in the Serie A, they're yet to do that. And I think they did in the Serie A last season. I don't know. I just I just really, really struggle to see how Inter will be. Will be allowed to beat this Juve. I think 1-1 is where it's at. What about you, Mike? And then I want to go to Mo.
Honestly, I'm happy with a 1-1. I would like a win. We have talked about earlier how Inter really need as many wins as they can get up until the World Cup to really set themselves up for that second half, I guess, mad dash to the finish that's going to be coming around in the beginning of 2023. But I would take a draw. I could see one of these insanely chaotic 2-1 wins for Inter at the death, where everyone is buzzing for like 3 hours afterwards and no one can focus on anything and the weekend is gone. But I mean, I would take that. I'd be very happy with a 2-1. But I'm going to agree with you, 1-1. Lautaro's going to get the goal.
I hope you're right. Mo, you think Inter going to win, or do you think that what do you think?
Yeah, I think Inter are going to win. I think it's potentially even a 3-1 win.
Oof.
Yeah, I think so. I think again, it's all contingent on the team going onto the pitch with the right mindset, prepared correctly. I think there's no reason why not. So I think Lautaro should score a couple, and let's give Barella another.
Oof. Well, there's he certainly shows why we call him why he's Mr. Positivity, predicting stuff like that. But yeah, let's from your mouth to God's ears, Mr. Monasa. Right, let's go. Now it's time for the part of the show where we pay tribute, rip the piss out of, and criticize someone or something heavily in the world of football. Starting with the positivity, this week's Moratti, which will be presented by Mr. Mohammed Nasser.
He works a lot, he's intelligent, and he surprises people sometimes with his ideas. Not easy to find one person of these qualities.
So this week's Moratti is actually two different touches or plays. It's Di Marco's left foot receipt of the ball, and then assist to Dzeko for the first goal against Victoria Pilsen. And it's Barella's receiving the ball with his right foot, taking 2 steps, and then banging it in for that second goal against Sampdoria this weekend, which probably will be a contender for goal of the season come the end of the season. And I thought it's very interesting that both plays were ones where the player receives the ball with the same foot that he distributes the ball with minor steps, and both were half volleys. I just thought both of them were just exquisite, amazing, examples of ball control in a very dynamic sort of situation. It's not like they were stood still. Both players were running towards the goal at probably full clip when they received their balls and then distributed them. So these two touches, or these two receipts and then shots or assists, are my Moratti of the week.
I have to give a special mention, because my Moratti of the week is the former Inter Bologna-Napoli defender Massimo Tarantino. For when, if you'll remember, there was a horrible incident in Milan in a supermarket or a shopping mall, I think it was a supermarket, where a mentally ill person grabbed a knife and started stabbing people. And one of the people he stabbed was Pablo Mari, who plays for Monza. And one of the people, and the reason I say Massimo Tarantino is my Moratti, is because Massimo Tarantino was able to disarm the person who was stabbing people and held him down until the police came. And I'm going to read out what he said. He says, "I was at the checkout line with my wife and my 22-year-old daughter, having gone shopping. I saw this man. At one point, I started to hear screams, but screams of pain and fear. I saw this man running towards us with a knife in his hand. My first reaction was to put myself in front of my family to protect them. Then he struck an employee who was a meter away from me, and in the clash, they fell to the ground. It was at that moment that I had the clarity to approach and kick at his hand. kick to the hand that was still holding the knife. But the weapon didn't go as far, so I pushed it away and blocked his hand with my foot. He didn't try to escape. It was like he had let himself go, as if he had died. I saw, and then afterwards he says that he saw Pablo Mari's family immediately after the attack, and said, I saw his wife and son near the tills when it was all over, and the rescuers were intervening, but I think Pablo was hit in the central area between the aisles. That's where the first screams came from and the alarm. But I'm absolutely no hero, he said. Now that to me that's heroic stuff. That's superhero stuff right there. So for me, Massimo Tarantino is the Moratti of the week. Right, let's move on to something much more comical. This week's Frog, which will be presented by Mr. Michael McDuffie.
È clamoroso! Autogol di Ranocchia!
Yeah, I guess we got some lightening up to do. Nima, we talked about this because I was like, wow, how can I, top what Jake Smalley does, week in, week out over here. And I found something from the only source I found, I haven't looked much deeper, but is a YouTube clip. It's on a great follow, Francesco Calcio on Twitter. Great follow.
Yes.
Always something obscure. I love it. This is my favorite genre of tweet.
Yeah.
But in a Serie D match between Vado and Ligorna or Ligiorna, I'm not entirely sure. I've never heard of either of these football clubs ever. The Vado president decided to get on the stadium speaker and began to insult the referee mid-match. Yeah, it reminded me of something that if Antonio Conte owned a football club, it seems like something he would do. And it was just wonderful. Very, very, yeah, perfect.
Did you know what they were saying? Was there any, like, did you find out, did Francesco tweet anything about what kind of insults it was? Because Francesco's really good. Sometimes he finds an angle of, okay, well, they insulted like this because there's this history or whatever. But did he say anything about that?
No, there's a whole video. The entire video is in Italian for those who speak or those who want to translate. It'll get linked, I'm sure. Yeah, I will link you. And yeah, it's just I'm sure a call went bad, and then that was it. It's always you, or whatever Conte said to I forget which ref it was.
Sempre tu, Maresca.
Yes.
Sempre tu. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, that'll be linked. And I hope somebody can get back to me with what was actually said.
Oh, I will. Don't worry. Link me the video and I'll translate it for you. It was in another Serie C, which Francesco also tweeted out. It's at @FrancesCalcio _ Can really recommend that. But he tweeted another thing, which I sent to you as a brilliant frog. The manager of Serie C club Montevarchi got into a fight with the opposing manager who was Cesena coach, and threw a focaccia in his face.
Yeah, I read that, and apparently it was like a smaller version of a focaccia roll that was like a little bit harder. Because I was like, how did he cut? Because they said he drew blood, and it was two great ones to pick from this week. But yeah, I know we hadn't discussed the first one, so I had to.
Absolutely. Right. Let's move on to something much more negative. This week's Moggi, which I'll be presenting myself. So this week's Moggi can't be. I mean, aside from the stabbing that we saw, which is horrible, and one person died, and that's horrible. But for me, that person was mentally ill. But for me, what is the Moggi of the week is, without a doubt, Curva Nord embarrassing themselves. And if, for those of you who don't know what happened, it was an Inter 3-0 win over Sampdoria in the Serie A, when scandalous scenes erupted at the Stadio Giuseppe Meazza, when the Curva Nord decided to in the second half, early in the second half, the 50th minute, they ordered everyone standing in the north stand of the Stadio Giuseppe Meazza to vacate the stand immediately. And the reason they decided to do this is to pay tribute to a former ultra boss, one of their former leaders, whose name is Vittorio Boiocchi. He had died, been shot to death in Milan in what police described as an ambush earlier that night. He was 69 years old when he died, and he's been described in Italian media as one of the historical heads of the Inter Ultras. And he had, according to various media, Italian media, spent more than 26 years in prison for drug trafficking, theft, and kidnapping. And so in order to honor him and his death, they ordered everybody in the stand, about 10,000 people, to immediately leave the stand and empty it, including by force, spitting, kicking, insulting, threatening women and children. And this has obviously turned into a complete scandal. The Italian Minister for Sport has spoken to Inter. Inter have released a statement completely denouncing this. And I mean, look, the Curva and the Ultras, they do create a lot of, incredible atmosphere at the stands in Italy. But I don't think that good atmosphere is something unique to Italy. We have that in Germany. We have that in lots of countries. But what we do have uniquely in Italy is the fact that these people are living in, that they're completely, there's lawlessness in these curvas, not just Inters, but all over Italy. These guys get free tickets. They get free travel. We all know, I mean, it's not exactly, it's not a state secret to say that they make money off of selling drugs and bootleg alcohol in the stands as well. They're criminals. It's as simple as that. Not every single person in the curva who stands in the curva is, but I'm talking about the ultras, these people, and how they finance their operations. And we know that it's not a secret. There was a report I read that this guy who died was making 80,000 euros a month from illegal activities at one point when he was arrested. So, this is, we talk about why Italian football doesn't improve. Can you imagine this happening in the Premier League or in the Bundesliga or in any other top 4 league, where all of a sudden in the 50th minute, the entire North Stand is emptied by people who think that they own the club and they own the stands, and that they're more fans than everyone else, that they're more entitled to being an Interista than everyone else. And I've seen some really stupid comments on this as well, saying, well, you can't get rid of them because they do all the fantastic choreographies or tifos and flags and songs and chants. I'm pretty sure that flags, chants, tifos, choreographies, and criminal activity is not there's no correlation between the two. I think you can have chants, singing, flag waving, and amazing atmosphere at a stadium without drugs being sold, without this kind of this criminal behavior that they do, that these so-called leaders of the ultras do. And it's just exhausting. And I know that I don't know anyone in Italy who likes them. I don't know how many journalists in Italy have told me that they despise them. Friends, family, all ages, journalists, just they're not very popular. And this behavior, it's just, they need to do something about this, because imagine, people pay a lot of money to go to Inter games. Some people come from other continents, from the United States, from South America, from Sweden, from Africa, from every parts of the world people come from to watch Inter. And these guys decide that you have to leave because one of our mates, a guy, and we're not talking Nelson Mandela or Mahatma Gandhi here, we're talking a guy who spent a third of his life in prison for drug trafficking, kidnapping, and theft. I mean, the whole thing is so bizarre, and it's just so depressing, in my opinion. So they are the Moggi of the week.
Yeah, can I get something in on that real quick?
Go.
Okay, yeah, this is just, it's really interesting, and it really is a phenomenon in, greater football as a whole, separating fandom separating love for club from, outside stuff, from the the crime and everything else. It can be separated, and it needs to, especially if Italian football wants to, do a little bit of reputation building. It's not been the greatest reputation, since however long you want to go back. But something like this recently, maybe a few years ago, happened with Lazio Ultra, right? Where it was someone ambushed over something shady, and there was a whole thing, I remember. But it reminded me of a book that I've been meaning to read. 1312 Among the Ultras by James Montague. I know there's a part in there where he actually interviews some Lazio Ultras, and I mean, it's very interesting. I just wanted to point that in people's directions if they wanted to, learn some more about what the hell's going on.
Very good point, Mikey. Absolutely. And yes, to me, it's bizarre. It's like having that, it's like everyone has that like really stupid friend or relative who says, well, Mussolini was bad, but at least he made the trains go on time. Like there's no correlation between death camps and fascism and only trains going on time. We can have trains go on time. The trains go on time in Sweden. We don't have fascism and do you know what I mean? Like it's just this notion that if you can't touch the ultras because they're the ones who make the stadium sing up. No, I'm sure we can have good atmosphere and fantastic things, uniquely for Italian football, the songs, the chants, the tifos. I think we can have that without having this criminal element as well. I think it's perfectly plausible. And the fact that I have to say that, to me, I feel like it's laughable. I feel like I'm in a parody that I even have to clarify that. But, what are you going to do? Right, that's all we had time for this week. I'd like to thank Sheridan and Mo. They both had to run out. Make sure to check them both. I'll be tagging to Sheridan's work and also be tagging you as well, Mr. Michael McDuffie, and your excellent pod, which I really recommend people to follow. So thank you for coming on again, Mr. Michael McDuffie.
Yes, of course. Thank you for having me on again. Anytime you need, just let me know.
Definitely. Thank you so much. And until next week, stay safe, take care of each other. And this is Nerazzurri wishing you a good week, 6 points, and sempre e solo forza.